Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about a major event in the past, present, and future of Dungeons and Dragons, and that is the release of the Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth set. Truly astounding. So I already talked about Rudy from Alpha Investments. He's a major player. This guy, he literally millions of dollars. I think he directly impacts Magic MTG Finance. I don't know if you guys know this, but MTG Finance is a thing. Like, there is literally people who use, so super rich people, they don't, they don't live by our rules, right? So they do swag, which is silver, wine, art, and gold, right? Like, they're like beyond, like when they trade amongst each other, they don't trade money, right? Like, it's like, we both have money. What's the point, right? Do you have silver? Do you have wine? Do you have art? Do you have gold? I want that, right? Like, let's do that, right? And so Rudy from Alpha Investments, major player in MTG Finance, like, not a joke. That dude's been doing it for like 7 or 8 years, literally millions of dollars on the line, millions of dollars of product. And it does get weird because I think he actually impacts MTG Finance, but he says a lot of stuff that you'd be like, that's kind of weird. If you actually have an impact on MTG Finance, why would you say that? Very unusual guy. So he said Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth is an absolute game changer for Hasbro, right? What's really incredible is just the possibilities of what this means for Dungeons and Dragons, right? You can go find a million people squawking about the cards and what they mean from a mechanical perspective, but a lot of these, the MTG world and the D&D world, both parts, both communities really have no idea how powerfully Magic the Gathering and how Magic the Gathering and D&D are combined, right? And I want to talk about that combination, right? Because right now you see Hasbro, in my opinion, pretending that that a soup has been made and Dungeons and Dragons. Well, first of all, it's not debatable. Dungeons and Dragons and MTG are mixed. There's like 10 different sets they're canon through, and then there's lots of MTG sets, worlds, realms that are not canon, right? And so what Hasbro wants to sell you is that the MTG and the Lord of the Rings combination, the products are combined. They want to tell you that combination is the carrots in the soup, right? So if you order, soup at a restaurant and they deliver it with carrots, but you don't like carrots, and they're in big chunky, sections, you can just pick them out, right? Like you could eat around, right? But here's my point. That's not the case with Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons. They are incredibly connected, and I'm going to talk about it right now with this Lord of the Rings set, right? So they attach this term Universe Beyond to say, hey, we know Innistrad, Kaladesh, Dominaria, Theros, Ravnica, Strixhaven, those are all D&D canon settings now, right? Canon on the MTG side, canon on the Dungeons and Dragons side, right? But these aren't canon to D&D, and they're separate from D&D. Are they? Right? Because it gets so complicated, and I will tell you right now, I'm going to say this flat out. It is my opinion that I am the foremost expert on Dungeons and Dragons canon in the world. I know more about it than anyone, right? And the reason why is there's a lot of wonks out there. I'll tell you, Tim Cook, or is it Ken? Yeah, there's. They'll say Larry Elmore drew this painting in 1978, or 1982, whatever, blah blah blah, right? And they have this box for D&D canon, right? They don't know that like Creo, like that's Star Trek, right? Like that Dungeons and Dragons had Creons, right? Minifigs that were made at exactly the same scale that could share the same equipment and could be used as miniatures. with Star Trek figures. Did you know that? Did you know that there was one company who made both Dungeons and Dragons miniatures and Star Trek miniatures, so that you could just bring Star Trek characters? You could literally put the sword from your Dungeons and Dragons character in the hand of Spock, and you could put the phaser from Spock in the hands of your D&D Ranger. Or were you aware of that? I am. I know what intellectual properties Dungeons and Dragons mixes through Yahtzee, right? And what's interesting is I really believe I'm the foremost expert in the world, because a ton of people take themselves off the list because they draw a box. They're like, oh, I just care about the books, right? But those days are done, right? Ravnica, Theros, and Strixhaven have made sure that Magic the Gathering's worlds are literally canon connected, right? In the narrative, right? So, and if you don't know that part, you have a lacuna in your knowledge about D&D canon. Then, right, there's creatives at Hasbro, that work in the WotC offices that might have a possibility of knowing more than me, but they have to ignore this canon, right? And one of the reasons why is the creatives are essentially, they have very different goals than the suits, right? And they need to find creative ways to continue to expand the intellectual property of Dungeons and Dragons and make the product decisions that the suits are making into they have to mix it with the narrative. They want these things to connect together narratively, right? James Wyatt is the foremost expert on this. James Wyatt is really responsible for forever connecting to making sure that Dungeons and Dragons narrative and lore is no longer separate from anything Magic the Gathering ever publishes, right? Because until they break the plains, mountains, islands, swamp, forest, structure that they've already built into those other canon books, right? And so and this is really interesting. The experts that could be at Hasbro, I just watched a fantastic movie. I watched Day of the Jackal, and it was about this French group called the OAS, who was trying to kill Charles de Gaulle, who was the president of France, right? And they failed at it, and then they hired this British assassin, and the British assassin said, the reason you guys failed is your emotion, right? You're too close to it, right? And I think everybody who's working, so first of all, half the people in the world who talk about D&D canon, they draw a box around it. That means they don't even look at canon completely. And then the other people who work at Hasbro, who might have the possibility of knowing more than me, don't, because their emotion gets in the way. They can't look at it from, they're literally invested in making sure that all these product decisions that happen on the suit side of Hasbro get fixed narratively by the creative side. So they're emotional about it, right? So I'm like the contractor, the British contractor they bring in. I'm not bringing emotion to it, right? And so when we talk about this, right? So you're talking about D&D canon with Lord of the Rings, and so get this, right? So what I'm saying is this Lord of the Rings thing, the Lord of the Rings set is massively connected already to Dungeons and Dragons. It doesn't have the canon stamp yet, but it is so intermixed with D&D canon already that I think the Tolkien estate has no idea how much canon they have, Lord of the Rings canon they've already inserted into Dungeons and Dragons. Let me explain why, right? So they say Universes Beyond. They say it, but they don't do it. Hasbro doesn't do it, right? That's the problem with this Universes Beyond. It's a sticker, and it peels right off, right? And it's not real. And I'm gonna tell you that right now. I'll show you exactly how it is right now, right? So this Lord of the Rings thing, right? They bring it in, and they're like, oh, this is separate. It's a universe beyond. And you're like, oh, okay, I got you. These are supposed to be played. These cards are you can't mix these with D&D cards, the ones that are canon, right? The Strixhaven, the Ravnica, and the Theros. Oh, no, you absolutely can mix them with Theros. So you can make a deck where you have heroes from Strixhaven, heroes from Theros, and heroes from from Ravnica. Oh, and you can also put Aragorn. You can put Legolas right next to Elminster. Yeah. And you want to know why? Because it's in Modern, right? What format is Lord of the Rings in, right? So Tolkien Estate had to sign off on this, right? And they could say, listen, you can make your little Magic set, but don't you dare let this get mixed in with that Dungeons and Dragons stuff. It needs to be a universe beyond, right? They said it, but they didn't do it, right? So at literally thousands of games happen right now, right? Where people are like, oh yeah, here's my Elminster, and here's my Strixhaven, you know, and here's Professor Onyx, and here's Eowyn. They're all in the same world. And is there a story here? Yeah, absolutely. Each Magic the Gathering match is a story. It's a narrative story. You're a planeswalker, and you're casting these people and these equipments and these events as spells. And it's a story, and there's a battlefield, right? And there have been many books that have talked about this mixture of this story, right? So, and that story is intermixed with Dungeons and Dragons, right? By making the set modern and fitting it into the modern milieu, right? Right there. All she wrote, baby. Right? Like, you know, you are literally putting Drizzt Do'Urden right next to Aragorn and saying, these two narratively belong together, right? Universe Beyond, hey everybody, that's for those silly suits who think that that loader is not part of D&D already. But it is, because the Magic players are fully intermixing them. Oh, and also, you know, Magic cards are being used at D&D tables every day now, and these cards will be used as well, right? And so that's the part I love, and this is the part where I feel, you know, that's what I love about this channel. I talk about it now. You'll hear it from other people 3 to 5 years later, right? Like, and that's the issue. I was saying, hey, you could improve your life with Dungeons & Dragons 5 years ago. Now there's a guy literally building a Game Master therapy game. Keys of, I can't remember the keys. Yeah, I actually saw it at PAX 2023, so 2022. But you know, and that's the issue, is the canon of Dungeons and Dragons. If in the soup, these are not carrots you can pull out. In this soup, they were like, oh, two billion cubes of MTG, 1 billion cube of D&D, and it's mixed. Like, you can't pull it out. The broth is completely mixed, right? And so when these Lord of the Rings cards, which are being massively bought, not just by Magic the Gathering players, as they continue to play, they're like, oh, Drizzt Do'Urden can go really well with Aragorn. Wait a second. I don't have to stop that storytelling here at the Magic Gathering section, at the Magic Gathering play style. I can put Aragorn and, you know, and look, I can put Aragorn and Elminster together literally in the Forgotten Realms. In fact, I've been provisioned to do that because these cards have been components since the day they published Ravnica, right? Which is canon in D&D and canon in MTG, and Dungeon Masters began using the MTG cards as D&D components, as unbound canon pages of Dungeons and Dragons, right? The mix is incredible. The last thing I wanted to tell you was, so Rudy said, hey, this is an absolute game changer, right? And he's like, and also he said, reserve list doesn't even matter anymore. It's the serialized cards from Lord of the Rings that matter. Then I just watched a video yesterday with an FLGS guy, not a multi-million-dollar MTG finance influencer, just owns an MTG shop, just owns a Magic the Gathering shop, and has owned it for 2 years, you know, saved his whole life to open up a little FLGS, and sells D&D on the shelves at that very store, right? You know, but the primary purpose is for Magic sales, right? Guess what he said? He said this is the most successful set he has ever seen, and that he has people coming in selling their old collections, including reserve cards, to buy as much Lord of the Rings as they can get to get the serialized cards. That is astounding. And you know, we haven't even seen the collection of the nobody's, you know, gotten the the one of one ring yet, right? So that's still out there, and there's currently a $2 million bounty for that, right? Truly incredible. I think Lord of the Rings is an absolute game changer, not for Magic, for Dungeons and Dragons. And I think it's the paved road that we will actually receive Dungeons and Dragons canon Lord of the Rings book. And I'll tell you right now, that 5e garbage book that they're creating right now doesn't matter. I would not buy that, in my humble opinion. And the reason why is it's going to fast be replaced by an actual D&D canon book, in my humble opinion. Plus, who wants, like, is it D&D? It's 5e. Thank you, next. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.